Welcome to this video. This is a long video. The story should offer you real-life perspective on what conflict in your trial process can look like. Our goal at childcustodyuniversity.com is to keep you out of conflict, out of court, and if the conflict cannot be avoided, the outcome for your child is improved. James had his kids and they were doing well. His ex-wife was well-funded, intentionally engaged employment with the mental health industry, and seemingly plotted with intention to cause conflict and alienate the children. James was naive and completely blind-sided. This story should offer you the perspective to recognize some serious red flags. If you see these red flags, you know you need help, and then you know we are here for you.
Welcome to Child Custody University, Module 8, a custody and parental alienation story. This is all the opinion of James Feehan, a non-attorney and non-counselor. Nothing here is professional advice of any type. As much as this information is opinion of a non-professional, we invite you to check any facts with your preferred professional with an open and honest conversation with them. Parental alienation is a psychological problem that requires a legal solution. The following information is what it looks like. This story is about James Feehan, the founder of childcustodyuniversity.com LLC. He has spent many years studying events that transpire in custody cases, from the laws and precedents that create outcomes to the personalities that seem to repeat in that legal process referred to as a child custody case. When I speak of things that happen in the system and with personalities, I will be speaking generally. When I speak of events with James and his children, I will be as specific as possible. James mentions the secrecy and shame that people walk around with after a case is disposed of, and the false belief that a family's business should be kept secret. Whether you agree or disagree with James about the topic of family secrecy, let it be understood that the following information is not intended to maintain secrecy. James believes that the secrecy is part of the problem and dysfunction. It is often definitely a symptom. Shining a light on the issues around child custody and parental alienation needs to be done and done with accuracy and honesty. People don't want to be open about the issue because everyone involved has some degree of responsibility for the problem. Most people also do not document the events and the process in a detailed manner for complete analysis. When a person does enough research, many cases of parental alienation are predictable even before the children are born. One of the features that James sees over and over again is secrecy as a family value from the family or origin of the alienating parent, and often with the target parent. This enmeshment style from the family of origin is expected by the alienating parent and taught to the alienated children as a valued tradition. Protecting the family value of hatred and the alienator as the head of the operation is necessary for parental alienation to exist, and it is very ugly. In support of this concept is an article in Psychology Today posted June 3rd of 2023, titled, "A Possible Upside of Being Scapegoated in a Toxic Family." Here is a great segment of that article subtitled, "A Clear View of Toxicity in the Family of Origin." This post is drawn from text in Peg Streep's book, Verbal Abuse, Recognizing, Dealing, Reacting, and Recovering. This is referring to being scapegoated. Here it is. Yet, in all of this, there may be a silver lining. Of all the children growing up with a verbally abusive parent or parents, the scapegoated child is more likely to come to terms with and recognize the toxic patterns of the family dynamic. He or she is more likely to seek help healing from these patterns and their effects than her or his siblings who have bought into the family story, lock, stock, and barrel. Paradoxically, the scapegoat is often the only child in the family who has a shot at being able to have healthy and sustaining relationships once she or he has sought help. That's because, even without being scapegoated, the other children in the family are learning at the verbal abuser's feet. They learn that being safe from abuse and being supported are transactional and not a given. They are reminded of that by seeing how the scapegoat is treated. They develop deficits in empathy by normalizing verbal abuse, being bystanders, or sometimes joining in on the blame game. They learn to tamp down their emotions and hold their tongues to go along to get along. If there is a favored son or daughter, or one of each, these trophy children know that love is earned by fulfilling parental expectations. They live in a world governed by external achievement and how they look to others. Who they actually are is of no import. so their own self-regard rests on the most fragile of foundations. Trophy children know nothing about introspection, and even less about their true selves. They carry those mental models into their adult relationships since they're disinclined to look beyond what the family mythologies tell them. This article offers great perspective in support of the perspective that James is offering. Consider as you read, and you will be reminded at the end, to reconsider that the alienator easily fits trophy child role, and the target or alienated parent easily fits the scapegoat role. Once you see this, clarity and predictability can happen. There are two personality types that are considered high conflict, commonly found with the alienators as well. The styles are borderline personality disorder type and narcissistic personality type. These are two fear-based personality types that, for stability, require others to walk on eggshells and overcompensate for the irrational fears of the disordered personality. This brings to light the personality of the other parent, the target parent who receives the hate form the children. In a word or two, weak boundaries define this person. James was this person who reacts incessantly to the manipulation and the high conflict disordered personality. Some learn this as a child from a similar disordered parent to the alienating parent. It seems quite the couple. The target parent often has a parent that is similarly disordered to the alienating parent. A family of origin with secrets partners with another family of origin with secrets. One parent is one that needs secrets kept for peace, and the other is great at keeping the peace and secrets. This works until new boundaries emerge by a particular party in the process. Parental alienation also creates what is called black and white thinking. This is where the children, the victims, are forced to see one parent as all good no matter what, and the other as all bad no matter what. This is a coping mechanism forced onto the undeveloped minds of children, who use this to survive with the alienating parent. The complexities of reasonable discernment are too much for scared children. They simplify the thoughts with what they can process based on their age and development. These are the symptoms that invite shame on a family that experiences parental alienation. This may be why no one talks about it. James intends to sacrifice his real shame about a lack of boundaries and dysfunctional relationships in his past to help other families now. Here goes. 3 different mothers and 5 children started with James as a 17-year-old teenager and a 24-year-old woman who fled with a 3-month-old child, likely to avoid felony charges of statutory rape. This child was a little girl. This mother did her best to train this child to hate her father, while telling the father, James, that the little girl was not his child. James and his daughter were reunited by his efforts to ensure her paternity was known when she was 19. James learned that her mother told her that the brace she wore as an infant to finish developing her hip sockets that were underdeveloped was in fact a cast for broken bones that her father caused. Her mother falsely claimed that James had abandoned and abused them in some fashion. This daughter has stories of abuse and abandonment from her mother that she actually experienced, but remained loyal and with elements of black and white type of thinking. Cognitive dissonance is the state of having inconsistent thoughts and beliefs, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude changes. Every child that becomes a victim to parental alienation experiences cognitive dissonance to a degree that is very pathological. What becomes obvious here is the lack of boundaries and parental supervision that James experienced as a teenager himself. This was also sad. Mother number 2 had a son that James believes he is the father of, but it is not definitive. She was arrested several times for violent offenses, felonies, including offenses against James, another man that she married, and for crimes against children. Her convictions are numerous. She was institutionalized and diagnosed with borderline with an explosive component due to her outbursts of violence. One might ask, why did James not have custody with all of this happening? The authorities asked her for the contact information for James, the father. Her response was that he had died in the military, and guardianship was given to her then partner or husband. James was serving in the U.S. Army and unable to act and react in a traditional manner to fatherhood. All the while, she was receiving child support, and the social workers on the case settled to trust her word. It should have crossed the minds of the social workers for Orange County, Florida, to question how a dead father would be paying child support. A lesson here is to understand the level of care a particular employee, officer, agent, or worker from any institution is able to offer your child. The system is overwhelmed with needs. There was a time after James left the military that he tracked them down and initiated contact with the mother and the child. Mom used this opportunity to have the 8-year-old child get on the phone with James and set up a fake meeting in Orlando so that she could accomplish process serving. The case was later dismissed, but using a child like this is horrible. To this day, James does not know if his son believes he simply didn't care enough to show up where his son agreed to meet, or if his son has guilt for betraying his father. This is a sad story for everyone. Then there was mother number 3 with 3 sons. James was still in the military and stationed in New Jersey when they met at a local community college. James recognized dysfunction and left her just before extended military travel. Literally, he broke up with her because she lied about everything. On the way out the door, she told James she was pregnant. He did not believe her, but eventually learned it was true, and she claimed it was his after claiming it belonged to another man. Being raised in a very traditional Christian community and culture, as well as being naive, James married her because that is what was expected. He didn't feel right about it because he experienced such abusive behaviors from her family of origin. This was the first time ever that the family of a girlfriend wasn't really happy about him being involved with their daughter. The hatred was intense with them. James remembers hearing her parents talking about how out of control James was because they could not control him, seemingly unaware that controlling him was not their role. All of the warning signs were there. James did not recognize the seriousness of the warning signs out of simple ignorance, but they were huge flags that were bright red. This relationship was constant tension as James was still in the military, and Jennifer, the mom, had parents that were incessantly controlling and did not want their daughter to leave New Jersey and move 3 hours away to the Washington, D.C. area with some random James. Jennifer's parents never made an attempt to have even the most surface of relationship with him, even for the purpose of learning who their daughter was marrying. Their judgment was that he was in the military, and because of that, he was not worth their time. Her father was openly abusive toward James. You might think they were highly educated snobs of sorts. It is doubtful that her father graduated high school, but he was a hairdresser, and that did require some sort of vocational education. They were not educated people. They did respect, value, and encourage education for their children. On the surface, they appeared relatively normal, but then again, don't we all at times? There was a very odd dynamic that was very pathological that James could not identify at the time. They did decide they knew all about James without so much as a meaningful conversation, though. That lack of interest or interaction was very important in retrospect. Eventually, James filed for divorce because of chaos, dishonesty, and unfaithfulness. Life was a constant game and power struggle in this relationship. Even after the divorce, the chaos remained. The biggest example of the serious dependency issue that came to light with Jennifer was the fact that James was doing much of Jennifer's schoolwork while she studied psychology at Boise State University. The deal was that he would continue to help her graduate and then she would be on her own. He ensured she turned in the work by doing it. After her graduation, she stated to her 5-year-old son that daddy was kicking her out and she would be homeless. This child cried to his father to help his mom, so she didn't have to live in the street. James foolishly agreed for a time, but evicted her after a very long period of about a year. This began a series of events that really describes the alienation psychology. Suddenly, Jennifer became dependent on her parents for money and survival. James was told by Jennifer that her parents' help came with a promise from Jennifer to do everything she could to get custody of the 3 boys back and leave the state and come back to New Jersey with the kids, or they would not help her. Jennifer seemed to be caught in a bind, where she did not have the skills or the ability to set boundaries with her parents or James. As described by James, Jennifer appeared to be making promises to both him and her parents that contradicted and conflicted. It is unclear if Jennifer even knew what she wanted. Meanwhile, there are now 3 boys between Jennifer and James with their futures at stake. In 2010, Jennifer filed her custody case with grand accusations demanding full custody and claiming that James had committed acts of contempt. Her case was funded by her parents. The case she filed ended with a disposition of Jennifer having less custody than before. The arrangement became what is referred to as a 4-10. This is where James has the children for 10 out of 14 days and Jennifer had them every other weekend. Jennifer forced herself into this by creating a toxic environment for the children in her home with abusive behaviors that were easily provable. This environment included parental alienation. She was angry. She had problems with her employer as well as she had an affair with the boss. They worked at a mental health facility that treated children. Both the boss and Jennifer had convictions that could have caused them to be excluded for employment at that particular place for their particular positions. Her boyfriend at one point threatened to kill James over a voicemail. He ended up with a bit of time in a jail cell and looking for a new job. The facility investigated the matter of their history and relationship, and my understanding is that they eventually dismissed Jennifer as well. This custody arrangement lasted about 1 year before a plan was hatched. Jennifer obviously adjusted her behavior so as to avoid detection. The oldest child went from 13 to 15 years old between the first case and now the second case in late 2011. This time turned the oldest into an entirely different person, as it would for any boy. He was exposed to high school activities, which included skipping school, getting high, alcohol, and girls. He became belligerent, to say the least. He bullied his 2 little brothers and became very disrespectful in his father's home. At one point, he told James that his mother, Jennifer, told him that he was powerful because he controlled custody. He stated that his mother told him, "Wherever the oldest child goes, the other ones go too," and he was of age to choose. At Dad's house, he was grounded, and at Mom's home, he was given freedom, the extent of which could make many parents cringe. A reasonable parent would consider obtaining a counselor for this child, especially when in a child custody case. James did schedule and facilitate counseling for all the children. More than one counselor was obtained. Jennifer communicated to these counselors that she did not want their child being seen by a counselor, and consistently blocked counselors from interacting with the children with direct and veiled threats regarding license complaints. What Jennifer did do was hire a series of counselors to testify forensically regarding custody 4 different times. The first 2 times, the counselors flipped on her and informed her that they disagreed with her position regarding custody. Both of these counselors eventually testified for James. The next 2 counselors chosen by Jennifer violated ethical rules in favor of Jennifer, testified to facts that were not true, and are no longer licensed counselors. Both of these counselors had history together, and that should seem somewhat suspicious. Even more suspicious is that Jennifer had a prior professional relationship with the first of the last 2 counselors who was no longer licensed and violated her ethics. The last counselor Jennifer hired disregarded a court order, and another judge found that she did more harm than good with the children. A quick review: the first case where Jennifer filed, but due to her bad actions, James ended up as the primary parent with the 10-4 schedule. The second case started shortly before false allegations were made against James. This is where we are now. There was an incident where James made a bad parenting mistake by most people's standards, but not all. The oldest son was terribly dishonest and became violent with his little brothers several times. Jennifer had blocked any chance at obtaining a counselor for the children. This oldest son was correctly assuming he could get away with anything and stated as much. James called him into a bathroom with several of his items. James explained that he wanted to ask him questions and wanted him to be honest. For every lie his son told, James explained that he would destroy one of his personal items. James explained that this destruction is like what the oldest son was doing to his father and his brothers when he lied and became belligerent, and James wanted his oldest to understand consequence to his actions, because everyone else in the house had to suffer. This was all explained to him then. This son and James went into the bathroom. After 3 or 4 items were destroyed with a hammer, this son gave in and became honest and remorseful. The 2 younger sons were aware of what happened because they heard it to some degree and witnessed their older brother cleaning up the mess when it was over. Subsequently, there was a long discussion between father and son lasting about an hour. The 2 younger ones were taking turns taking their evening showers in that same bathroom after it was cleaned up by the oldest. We are dealing with a 15-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 9-year-old. As James and the oldest son are talking, the oldest son becomes emotional and is crying. He explains the pressure he is under to fix the custody for Mom and hates his life because he feels it is his fault that Mom is so sad. His head is down and he is crying. James walks close to him, puts his hands under his chin to lift his head and make eye contact. James explains that he is a child and no mistake that any parent makes is his fault, and he should just start blurting out the truth so he doesn't hold it in anymore. As this is happening, the middle son sees Dad holding the chin and the oldest crying as he crosses the hallway to take a shower. As far as James knew, the evening was over and there was a positive outcome. James could not have been more wrong. Behind the scenes, the oldest son and Mom were already making police reports about serious violence that never happened. Law enforcement came over often based on Mom's consistent calls. One evening, they asked about the incident. James answered honestly, and the oldest son was questioned outside the residence by law enforcement, where he gave them one of at least 3 variations of a false narrative. The police left, and James and the kids all went to bed and went on with life. Life seemed less chaotic, and the oldest son was doing better. About a month later, James got a call from a place he had never heard of, and they asked for Jennifer, the children's mother. James told them who they had called, and they hung up. James called back to see what it was about to give them her contact information. He later learned it was a facility ran by a local hospital associated with law enforcement activities. This call appeared later to be an important tactic used to create a situation that enabled the state to remove the children from their father's home. The removal paperwork stated that because James learned who had called, he then knew that his oldest son had been interviewed by them and was now in danger with James. This was a tactic used to enable law enforcement to remove children from a home where there was no other reason to remove them. If there was another reason, it would certainly have been listed on the documents, but the only reason noted was that James got a call that they claimed was accidental. This is not the first time this accident happened in this county, and when necessary to meet their goals, it would seem likely happen again. That particular day, though, James had no idea who that call was actually from. He went on with his day. Then his two youngest did not come home on the bus as usual, so James went to the school to find law enforcement there to question him about abuse. Thinking he had nothing to hide, he met them at the police station shortly thereafter, to learn that he would likely be charged with a crime, but learning nothing about the situation other than the state had the kids. A few days later, at a hearing regarding custody of the children, he was charged, and Jennifer got the kids. That was the end of James ever having a relationship with his children. The night before, the kids did their homework and were learning about their new snowboards and planning a trip up the mountain to enjoy them. The oldest son would not participate that evening. In retrospect, that made sense. He knew there would be no trip and that he would be talking to authorities the next day and not coming back. He later learned that his mother had tricked him into believing that this had nothing to do with criminal charges against his father. He believed he was simply telling a little lie to adjust the custody and not be grounded anymore, so he could have his freedom back and avoid consequences at Dad's house. It was basic 15-year-old stuff. He seemed surprised when all the criminal activity emerged. Charges were eventually dismissed due to the oldest son's ever-evolving narrative. There was actual evidence of this violence never happening due to timelines and video recordings. James's innocence was supported by audio recordings and subsequent interviews with the oldest son. The initial interviews with him were recorded by law enforcement, as were several others. The oldest son was coaxed by authorities to make up more violence than already stated, but he kept arguing that the allegations they were trying to get him to say were not true. The interviewers are on their own videos encouraging the oldest son to say more and escalate the accusation. These people doing the interviews were obviously biased. Jennifer told James months prior that she had friends in this institution that she had met in her work as a psychosocial rehabilitation worker with children. She has been at this facility prior and knew these people in this process already as part of her duties where she was employed. This rapport she had with them might be related to the bias they showed in their interview process. James believes that to be the case. These events frame the next custody trial that happens a few months later. There is a corrupt counselor that is no longer licensed now, but then was a key witness in the trial. She is one that is mentioned earlier and in other videos, Mydell Yeager in Idaho. James did file a comprehensive complaint to the licensing authority about her actions. She testified that the children were not alienated, but were estranged from James by his abusive conduct. When James requested to know the nature of this abuse, she refused a single detail, but testified that it was horrible, and the judge bought the lies hook, line, and sinker. About 3 years later, the children admit to lying about all the abuse. Until the admissions, most thought it must be true. They also were specifically asked to list the abusive behavior of their father after they admitted to lying. Their list now included, Dad had them drinking water to stay hydrated, not drink dark sodas, and eat fruits, vegetables, or yogurt with dinners at Dad's house. They were so alienated they actually believed that was abusive. They explained they had made up the lies about James, their father, because he deserved it because he made their mother sad. This is what severe parental alienation looks like. People will say that children will never hate their father unless he did something to deserve it. That actually sounds like something an alienating parent would say. Consider that this person thinking this knows nothing of the situation other than these people. The other parent that has control of the children and the children hate him, so he must deserve it. The children do not even know their father. This is similar to racism. It is far from rational to hate based on race. Then imagine you are a child under extreme duress to only show hatred. If you as an adult are so easy to turn into a person who doesn't like the father, how do you expect children to do different while being loyal to the alienating parent that controls their life? The idea that parental alienation is not real is silly. A person can also speak to adult survivors of parental alienation to get a deeper understanding of what it looks like and how the child feels and perceives things. For the benefit of children, the resistance to believe that parental alienation exists needs to stop. This trial process ends with Jennifer having custody and a requirement for reunification counseling between the two younger children and James. This order was basically ignored, and excuses were manipulated by the counselor recommended to take over from Mydell Yeager. She recommended a lady named Andrea Leeds. She was sort of a clown. She misdiagnosed the two kids based on the lies the kids told about the abuse they suffered. Just as Mydell Yeager did, Andrea Leeds refused to share what the alleged abuse was. These were the allegations the children later admitted to have made up and justified because James made their mother sad. Then, after several hearings to force the issue and threaten the counselor with contempt, James finally saw his children. They were seen in a facility where Andrea Leeds was ordered by the court to record the interactions due to the truth being somewhat elusive. Keep in mind, if this all looks ridiculous or biased, these were all counselors Jennifer, the alienating mother, had connection with outside of this custody case. We all met at the facility for the visits. At this facility, they monitor visits all day, every day. This is their business and has been for years. The owner noted in the file that these were easily the most disrespectful children that have ever been in the facility. They yelled, threw things, refused direction of not just James, but the staff. They had a level of arrogance that was pathological. These were the youngest sons of James, and he was heartbroken not just by the alienation, but seeing their character destroyed. It is very sad. James filed a petition for a new case, and there was another trial. The situation needed to end for the children. They needed peace. James was aware of the consequences for him in another trial, but also knew the kids needed secure and safe closure to the chaos. His petition was to have the kids removed from mom for reunification. This is a seemingly impossible thing to happen. It could, but no court would likely make it happen. Before you heard this story, you heard an excerpt from an article that included information about a trophy child and the scapegoated child. When they grow into an adult, they take on roles that are predictable. You were told you would be reminded to consider these roles in terms of parental alienation, because you may find value in the perspective. The alienator can easily fit the trophy child role, and the target or alienated parent easily fits the scapegoat role. Once you see this, clarity and predictability can happen. Mom filed a counter to take the kids to New Jersey, where her parents wanted her to be. Keep in mind, they were the driving force behind everything in Jennifer's life that James could see, and they completely funded Jennifer's fight. That recording of the counseling that Andrea Leeds was ordered to create was lost by her after she made false allegations that James was yelling and aggressive with the children. There was also another counselor present that countered her allegations. The false allegations never stopped, and no one was ever held accountable. The kids moved to Freehold, New Jersey with Mom shortly after the trial. Mom wins because the kids were too dysfunctional as a result of the parental alienation at Mom's home to be near their father. This is family court. Do not expect more out of a trial. A note directly from James here to all parents in conflict about custody follows.
Child custody is not about justice for a parent, which seems to be a big misunderstanding for most. It is about the children, and in my case, I pushed the envelope to force the court to make peace for my children in hopes that they develop healthier without seeing hatred in their parents and develop in that environment. They are adults now, and I understand the culture of their mother's family, and they will likely never allow my children peace with me involved in their life in any way. Should they at some point want or need their father, I remain available and understand the sacrifice it will take for them to engage with me. That is what a parent who loves their child would do, in my opinion. Love your children as they need, not as you need. My children were manipulated to lie, and but for these lies, the truth would not have been in question during the custody process. The truth is clear now, and my children seem to be in the dark to this day as to what really happened. They likely have no memory of the lies they were manipulated to tell. I cannot imagine the emotional and mental toll that the truth could have on them. The truth is the crossroads for decisions. This all happened during the custody process because I had no idea what the custody process looked like. I had no idea how to protect myself from what looks like rampant corruption or outright incompetence in the mental health industry and how it transfers into the legal process. I have made it my business to ensure that parents who choose are informed to prevent this from happening as much as possible in the future.
Should anyone see this video and ask themselves what James would expect or want for his children now, here that is from him.
I would want my children to be strong enough to engage each other and their father, me, in a discussion for reconciliation or greater understanding of the facts, or both. I would want all of them to understand that the process of reconciliation and understanding benefits them more than I. Not only do I believe they should understand the full facts of the past, but they need to be understood by their parents. They must have many unresolved feelings that are buried deep. Deep down, they know they were manipulated to lie against their father. Deep down, they have resentment for both parents to some degree because we both let them down in our own way. Walking life with hatred, disconnection, misunderstandings, and fear is a parent's job to prevent during childhood. I think they are owed great effort to help resolve the issues their parents created. I think they would need to be encouraged by their personal community to understand that a parent's mood and happiness is not their responsibility. They can have a relationship with their mother and father at the same time, even though it may feel difficult and get a negative reaction from individuals. Assuming it causes them some anxiety to make it happen, I would want them to find a counselor that would support honesty and growth rather than prioritizing the feelings of fear and weakness. Lying about their father as children is not who they are, and as a father, I am proud of them for sticking together and protecting each other then and surviving. Today they are adult and need to take responsibility for their futures, whatever that looks like.
The information and skills obtained through the process, and since, through the autopsy of James's custody, fatherhood, and his extensive research helping other people, is now for the benefit of parents that choose to partake in visiting childcustodyuniversity.com